so much for joining us on this edition of Leading Edge with Jerry Anderson. I'm Tiffany Tarpley. Well, today we're going to be talking about the importance of adoption as well as the importance of CPR. So let's get started. Well, joining me now is Bruce Tronolone to share his story. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you.
And so bystander CPR really saved your life. Take us back to what happened earlier this year. Tell us your story about what happened.
So back on March 20th, I was playing in a hockey game, call it a beer league for older men. And that day, I was actually pretty tired. So I was fatigued. So I guess those were kind of some of the early warning signs that I didn't really pay that much attention to. But I knew it was a playoff game, and typically had it not been that important, I probably would have stayed home and not gone to the rink. But being a playoff game, I kind of just slept in all day, dragged myself to the rink and, suited up and got ready to play, and told some of my teammates that I was feeling a little fatigued, but I'd probably be short shifting throughout the game, but I'm going to give it my all. So took to the ice. It was the second game of the night. Played 2 full periods of hockey, and at no time during that time did I feel fatigued, did I feel stressed, did I feel anything. And then I started the third period, and when I went out over the boards, I go over the boards, I skate out to the blue line. I watched the referee drop the puck to start the third period. And that was the last thing I remember, was him dropping the puck. Now, the important piece about it was I skated a full 3 minutes of that shift, but I only can remember the beginning of the shift. So I have no recollection of the shift at all. At the end of that shift, as I was coming off the ice, I was going to the bench. And just before I got to the bench, I just suffered a massive heart attack. I just collapsed at the door. But what was important about the ordeal was I had 2 teammates who knew CPR. And immediately, as soon as I went down, they came over the boards and they immediately started doing manual CPR on me. They realized I wasn't breathing, I didn't have a pulse. And within seconds, they were giving me chest compressions. And so that went on. So these guys, neither one of them had formal CPR training. One of them was the husband of a nurse, so he learned it from his wife. The other person was just, hey, I just want to be helpful. I'm just going to take my cue from this guy, and I'm going to step in when I need to. And these guys are, they're my angels. I mean, they were always outstanding teammates, but they came to my aid because I had zero pulse at that time.
Wow.
So they proceeded to give me the manual, the CPR for 5 minutes. And during that period of time, obviously the folks that were in the ring started panicking. Everybody's running around. We had a off-duty fireman from the previous game. He's a lieutenant, Jim Schulte. He was in the locker room from the previous game. And they went and got him, and along with himself and the referee, they were able to get the AED out of the main lobby, get the AED out to me. And probably about 5.5 minutes into the whole ordeal, Jim hooked up the patches to me and, took over CPR. The machine said, okay to shock, and he let the button go and my pulse came right back.
Wow.
So by the time EMTs got there, my pulse was back on track.
That's amazing. I mean, and just to think, just to know that the 2 gentlemen who helped you initially had no formal CPR training. Did you know CPR beforehand? And do you know it now?
Yeah, I'm going to say I knew of it. I didn't know exactly, how to do it. And then the other piece is I didn't really realize, the percentage wise, how, success, so the timing, how timing and, readiness was so important in this whole ordeal. And I keep going back and, you kind of relive it, what if? And so in a lot of cases, had it not been a playoff game, what would I have done? I probably would have just laid on the couch and not gone to the rink. If I was to have suffered that heart attack at home, the outcome may have been totally different. So being at the rink, being around people that knew CPR, being around people that were attentive and jumped in immediately, no time lost, having the AED there, all the pieces just perfectly lined up, and obviously I was, I always consider myself, I was in good shape, and I kind of spooked the guys in the league because everyone kind of looked and said, you were probably the least expected guy to suffer something like this.
Yeah, well, Bruce, we know it's so important for you to share your story to help others, and we thank you for doing that. I just want to let people know that they can visit cpr.heart.org to find a local CPR course. So you too at home can be in the know when something like this arises, if you are out or if you're with a loved one. And so, Bruce, it's also important to mention that you're going to be sharing your story at the Toledo Heart Ball, the Heart of Toledo Heart Ball. It's Thursday, November 3rd at the Inverness Club with the American Heart Association. For more information, you can contact the email on your screen, elizabethlewis@heart.org. It's going to be a wonderful evening, that is for sure. So, Bruce, I thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate sharing the story.
All right. Well, when we come back, we are also going to talk about the importance of adoption right here in Northwest Ohio. Well, November is National Adoption Month, and joining me now to talk about the importance of adoption is Adoption Supervisor with Lucas County Children's Services, Tymeeka Gipson. Tymeeka, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And so can you speak specifically to Lucas County at this point? How many children are in need of adoption right now or are waiting to be adopted?
Currently, we have approximately, I would say, 120 children waiting to be adopted. But as you may know or may not know, that number changes daily based upon, cases being transferred to our department, courts, cases that are in appeals. So that number does change weekly.
Okay. And talk a little bit about the process of adoption. How do families go about making that first step toward, adoption?
Well, what we like to actively advocate and recruit for foster to adopt families. We're not just an adoption agency. We want our families to understand the process and become foster parents and to open up their homes and their hearts to children on a foster level. And they will be duly licensed to adopt if that child becomes available to adopt. And that process generally entails engaging in classes and the home study process. And after that child becomes available to adopt, then we do a series of meetings and matchings so that we make sure that that family is appropriate for that child.
Is it typically a lengthy process? Like how long would a family have to foster before they're able to start that adoption process? Or maybe from fostering to adoption, how long is that typically?
It's a case-by-case basis, depending on what services are being offered to the parents, the family's engagement in services and compliance. It depends on court hearings, how, if there's lack of compliance, there's also depending on how court hearings are scheduled. So it can be a lengthy process. And in some cases, unfortunately, it will go rather fast.
And what kind of assistance do you provide during the process, whether it is, starting out with fostering and things like that? I'm assuming the agency is there to help these families, right? Help them through this process. What's out there?
Sure. Our agency offers case management services, information and referral services to foster parents. We link our children to counseling services. They also just ongoing case management services. There is a monthly per diem that is offered to families to assist in the aid of the children.
You know, an interesting statistic that I was given was nearly half of the children who legally had all ties severed with their birth families are 12 and older. How do you overcome these challenges, especially when you know that it is harder for older children to be adopted?
I'm glad you mentioned that because it is harder for older children to be adopted. Our recruiters, we also link our children to Wendy's Wonderful Kids as a second set of recruiters to assist the adoption workers in recruiting families. Our ultimate goal is to achieve appropriate permanency for the children by the means of adoption. We post on different websites. We send out to different agencies that are families that are looking to adopt. So we're always ongoingly recruiting for adoptive families.
What would you say to families who are a little nervous about the process, or maybe on the fence, kind of thinking about it, but are really unsure?
I would say my first step is to call the recruitment line, talk to one of the recruiters, find out a little bit more of what it actually means to become a foster to adopt family. Engage in those classes, continue to have those ongoing conversations with workers or recruiters.
And talk about the difference when it comes to foster to adoption, especially through Lucas County Children's Services. I'm sure there are other agencies out there that families can go to adopt a child. What's the difference in going this route?
Sure. Like I stated before, our agency is foster and possibly adopt. Most agencies, these are private agencies that is really catered to the adoption process. Our agency really promotes engaging in those classes, learning the process, working with families, and things of that nature. A lot of the other agencies, it's adoption up front.
Well, what do you enjoy about this work that you do?
I believe in the mission and protecting children, and most recently joining the adoption unit, really truly finding appropriate and safe permanency for our children. It is a happy ending when we can do that, and we really work together as a team here at the agency.
Is there anything I may have missed that you think it's important for people to know when it comes to this?
The only thing I would say is just strongly consider, make that first phone call and just learn a little bit more about really what Lucas County Children's Services is all about and our mission, and move forward with it. If it's on your heart and in your mind, move forward with it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tymeeka, for your time. I appreciate it. And coming up next, you're going to hear from a local family who has gone through the process and how things are going for them right now. A local family is sharing their story of adoption ahead of National Adoption Month. And joining me now are Larry and Regina Mack. Thank you so much for being here to share your story.
Thank you for having us.
Amen. Thank you for having us.
Well, talk a little bit about why you chose adoption.
Well, let me say this. First of all, it was my wife's choice first. And I didn't know she was serious until she started preparing a room. And then I was like, oh, she can do that. And then she bought a baby crib. So then I was like, oh, she's serious about this right here.
It was placed on my heart years ago, before we were married, and he agreed. So this is what I told him from the beginning. You agreed before we said I do. He said no problem. So it was really placed on my heart years ago. I think it was God ordained, to adopt a child, and I didn't know we were actually going to go on this avenue, but I believe it was the best avenue through the agency, Lucas County Children's Services.
And so talk about that. I mean, that meant you went from fostering to adoption. I can only imagine what that could be like, because you don't really necessarily know in a lot of cases what that fostering situation could turn into. How was that? Did you know for a fact that Ethan would be yours when you started first fostering him?
Absolutely not. And that was one of the things that a lot of people opinions were, some opinions were discouraging, like, man, you don't know which child you'll actually adopt. You can go through, because the main thing is to unify the families. But we didn't know Ethan was in the hospital. We got a phone call that there was a baby there and that he was left at the hospital, and we could just go spend time with him while he's there. We had no idea that 14 days later that we would be taking him home.
Well,
Yeah.
in my the way I was thinking, I assumed that we're going to be taking him home, because maybe I didn't know everything about the process, but we went with him. We was with him 4 to 6 hours a day, every day, holding him, because I believe love heals. Because he was premature, he was in the little blue tube thing, and shriveled up. But man, they told us between 1 and 2 months he can come home, but he came home in like 10 days with us. And so we've been with Ethan since he was 4 days old.
Wow. And how old is Ethan now?
18 months.
No. 6 months.
18 months.
Okay.
Oh, he's several months older, that is for sure. And so how has this time been with Ethan?
Oh, absolutely amazing. I'm telling you, like, I want to say the second day we were at the hospital, or probably the first day, they took his little mittens off, and I stuck my hand in there to pray for him. He grabbed my finger, and I can tell you, after that, it was like he was holding on, saying, "Don't leave me," And he is just the joy of our lives. I mean, he's absolutely beautiful. He has a sense of humor. He wakes up every day smiling and laughing. It's hard work, but it's worth it. He's truly just a blessing to our whole family.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a joy. He brings a joy to our relationship, and I, always thank her for Ethan. Like when you have a biological child and you want to thank your wife or your son or whatever, but had it not been for her, we wouldn't have had him. And because I got 2 girls, and now I have the joy of raising a son, and he wants to be like me. Like my wife doesn't like when I drink some water or something cold, I go, ah. And she said, "Don't be doing that," right? And then my son, now he goes, ah. So I think the beginning process for me is I had to make adjustments, because I had already raised 2 children, 25 and 21. And I know that process that I went through in my 20s, late 20s, and the bottles, the car seats and all that. And I was like, do I want to do that again in my 50s? And I'm 52 years old now. And so it took a little bit of adjustment. And then my job was to make the bottles in the morning, and her job was to change the diapers. So, getting up at 3, 4 bottles, you just get used to it. And then finally, he breaks out of the warmer bottle, and now you can just grab a bottle. Now you just grab a sip.
Let's be clear. He only got up one time. He gets up one time. And it's so funny because he would say, "Oh, Ethan slept through the entire night." No, you slept through the entire night. He got up. It is memories to our family.
But hold on. Lately, I'm talking about when he turned like 8 months or something, when he didn't have to warm the bottles up.
Okay.
All you do is say bottle.
Yes.
Well, this story is like so many other families, right? That is for sure. As far as what's happening in the home and that dynamic. Are there any concerns moving forward, going through adoption, and how you're going to talk to Ethan as he gets older? I mean, he does look different than you two, that's for sure.
Yeah. We have discussed that the beauty of it, I think, would be that he's going to ask us, or we'll have that conversation, because he has blonde hair, blue eyes. So clearly, he's going to know that he's adopted. But I think the love and all of the support that he's gotten up to that point, he will not have, hopefully he will not think about that he was not loved, because he is truly loved. When they say it takes a village to raise a child, I'm telling you, there's so many people at the church who love him. My mother, We don't have any grandkids on our side, so truly he is spoiled
His older sisters
by
love him.
her, his
Yeah.
oldest sisters. I mean, it's just so many people. But we will have that conversation, and you know, I'm just praying that it's not as challenging as what, you know, some people may think it's going to be. Once again, I think the support, family, and love kind of overrides some of that.
You know, and I think about it all the time, you know, how we're going to address the issue and how we're going to have that conversation. You know, but one thing I do want him to realize is that, you know, we didn't have to choose you, but we chose you. So you're chosen, you know, and those things along those lines. But I definitely think about that type of communication, you know, and I don't want him to feel rejected. I want him to really understand it was a really serious situation that he was rescued out of, and just support him. And I'm already seeing some giftings that he has, and want to put him in the right direction. And we want him to be the next president, really.
That's right. You know what? I only have a few seconds left. Just really quickly, what would you say to other families who might be considering adoption but aren't sure?
I would say, you know, for us, I thought it was great going through the agency, because those are children who really need help. You know, private adoption agencies, you know, maybe a little different. But, you know, just be flexible, be open, you know, be brutally honest with yourself. There's questionnaires that you have to answer. We chose, we didn't care about his ethnicity at all. So be honest as to what's a good fit for your home, you know, and we wanted the infant. Well, I did the infant up to 2 years old. So I think I love the fact that they have that questionnaire, and just be honest, you know, and be flexible, because anything can happen. We had some challenges the way, but we made it.
Well, Larry and Regina, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday. Have a great day.